Smart people in relationships the same way they close business contracts, clearly, directly, and with terms both parties can understand. Everyone else creates chaos, drama, and years of unnecessary damage. Let me show you the difference. The average person ends relationships like a coward. They ghost. They pick fights, hoping the other person will end it. They let things fade slowly until nobody knows what's happening, or they cheat to force a crisis. These approaches all have one thing in common. They avoid direct confrontation because confrontation is uncomfortable. Here's what smart people understand. Short-term discomfort prevents long-term damage. A difficult conversation today prevents months of confusion, resentment, and emotional terrorism tomorrow. This isn't about being cold. It's about respecting both people's time and emotional energy enough to be direct. Think about how business contracts end. When a contract isn't working, both parties acknowledge the situation, review the terms, identify what's not being met, and either renegotiate or terminate with clear conditions. Nobody ghosts. Nobody slowly stops showing up to meetings hoping the contract expires. They address it directly because that's the only professional approach. Now ask yourself why you wouldn't apply that same standard to something as important as a relationship. The answer is usually because you care more about avoiding discomfort than creating clarity. And that cowardice creates more damage than honesty ever could. Let's break down how smart people actually do this. First, they recognize the decision is already made before the conversation. This is critical. By the time you're ready to end a relationship, you've already processed the decision internally. The conversation isn't about debating whether to end it. It's about communicating a decision that's already been made. Most people make the mistake of entering the breakup conversation like it's a negotiation. They explain their reasons, and then wait for the other person's response, as if that response might change their mind. This creates false hope and drags out the pain. Smart people decide first, then communicate clearly. Second, they choose timing and environment deliberately. Breaking up isn't something you do drunk at 2:00 a.m. or in public or over text unless physical safety is a concern. You choose a private space where both people can react honestly. You choose a time when both people are sober and relatively calm. You show up prepared for the conversation to be difficult. This isn't about making it comfortable. It's about making it clear. You owe the other person the dignity of a direct conversation without audience, without chemical influence, and without time pressure. Third, they use what I call the clean break framework. This means you state the decision, explain your reasoning briefly without attacking character, acknowledge what was good about the relationship, make your boundaries clear, and then leave space for their reaction without debating the decision. Here's what that sounds like in practice. I need to tell you something difficult. I've decided to end our relationship. This isn't about something you did wrong or something I'm angry about. I've realized we're not compatible in ways that matter for long-term partnership. I value what we shared, but I need to be honest that I don't see a future that works for both of us. I know this is hard to hear, and I'm open to listening to how you feel, but I want to be clear that this decision is final. Notice what that statement doesn't include. Vague language like maybe we should take a break or I'm not sure if this is working. False hope like I need time to think or maybe in the future. Blame like you always or you never. Character attacks or lists of grievances. And most importantly, it doesn't invite negotiation. Fourth, smart people handle the practical matters like closing a contract. Who moves out and when? How shared finances are separated. Who keeps what property. How you'll handle shared friend groups. Whether you'll stay in contact or go no contact. These conversations feel cold to people who think breakups should be emotional and dramatic, but they're actually compassionate because they prevent the ongoing conflict that comes from undefined terms. When someone doesn't know if you might get back together, if you'll still talk every day, or if they should wait for you, they can't move on. Clear terms allow both people to start healing. Fifth, They maintain their boundaries after the conversation. This is where most people fail. They have a clean breakup conversation and then immediately undermine it by responding to late-night texts, agreeing to hang out as friends, or having sex one more time for closure. Smart people understand that post-breakup boundaries are just as important as the initial conversation. If you said it's over, it's over. That means no responding to breadcrumbs, no checking their social media, no mutual friends as spies, and no keeping the door open just in case. The business analogy applies here too. When a contract ends, you don't keep showing up to the office hoping to renegotiate. You honor the termination, collect your final payment, and move on to new opportunities. Relationships deserve the same respect. Here's what makes this approach powerful. It creates clean endings instead of messy entanglements. When you end a relationship with clarity, both people can process it and move forward. When you end it with ambiguity, both people stay stuck in limbo, analyzing every interaction and hoping for signs of reconciliation. The cleaner the break, the faster both people can heal and find better matches. The messier the break, the more time and energy gets wasted on something that's already over. Now let's address the main objection. Isn't this approach cold and unfeeling? Doesn't love deserve more emotion than a business transaction? This question reveals the fundamental confusion most people have about ending relationships. Being emotional during a breakup is natural and acceptable. Crying, being upset, expressing hurt, all of that is human and should be allowed. What's not acceptable is using those emotions as weapons or as substitutes for clarity. You can be sad and still be clear. You can be hurt and still maintain boundaries. The cold approach isn't being honest and direct. The cold approach is ghosting, lying about your reasons, or dragging someone along because you're afraid of being alone. Real cruelty is wasting months or years of someone's life because you're too cowardly to have a difficult conversation. Smart people also know that how you end relationships determines what relationships you can start next. If you end things with integrity, you maintain your self-respect and your reputation. If you end things with chaos and cruelty, that energy follows you into your next relationship. The way you leave someone tells them, and everyone watching, what kind of person you are. Messy exits aren't signs of passion. They're signs of poor emotional regulation and lack of respect. Clean exits demonstrate that even when things don't work out, you can be trusted to act with integrity. Here's the final truth about ending relationships like closing contracts. Most people can't do it because they never learn to have difficult conversations. They avoid conflict in all areas of life, so they definitely avoid it in relationships. This avoidance feels safer in the moment but creates disaster long term. The skill of ending relationships well is the same skill as having boundaries, giving difficult feedback, and negotiating clearly. These are all forms of respectful confrontation. And people who master respectful confrontation have dramatically better relationships because they address problems directly instead of letting them fester. If you want to be smart about relationships, learn to end them well. Decide clearly. Communicate directly. Handle logistics professionally. Maintain boundaries after. No drama. No ambiguity. No prolonged suffering. Just clarity, respect, and clean closure. That's how smart people do it. Not because they're cold, but because they understand that real care means not wasting anyone's time, including your own. Treat endings with the same seriousness you treat beginnings, and you'll avoid most of the relationship damage that destroys people.